Yesterday, the Cincinnati Bengals played one of the worst professional football games I have ever seen in my life, losing 48-10. It was the worst loss in franchise history. So coming up on today's show, it is Overreaction Monday. So we're going to go through a lot of overreactions that have been out there on social media, say whether it's fair or not, and we'll go through all of these because there have been a ton of overreactions over the last 24 hours. I want to hear from you guys, though. Was that the worst Bengals game that you have ever seen? I think it has to be, being the worst loss in franchise history, but maybe you've seen some worse stuff out there in the past. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section of today's show. Type Y for yes or N for no. All right, overreaction number one. This offensive line absolutely sucks. This is not an overreaction. They are absolutely terrible. And I have seen a lot of people out there blame the organization about the lack of, offensive line out there for the Bengals. But, let's be completely honest with ourselves. They did go out there a couple of years ago and they signed Orlando Brown Jr. He was one of the top, if not the top, offensive tackle free agents at the time. You drafted Dylan Fairchild in the third round with a top 100 pick last year. When Ted Karras got extended a few weeks ago, I saw a ton of people in the comments section said that it should have been a 3-year contract extension. So to me, seems like people like Ted Karras. You also drafted Amarius Mims in the first round last year. Then you go out this past year, you sign Lucas Patrick, and let's be honest, he was pretty good with the Saints last year. He did struggle during the preseason, so what did the Bengals organization do? They went out and they signed Dalton Risner, the best offensive guard free agent available. So it's not like the organization is not trying to get better at that offensive line, unit there. And I'm not a football coach. I'm not going to stand up here and say that, the scheme sucks. It's this, it's that. There's so many problems. Yeah, there's problems out there, but I don't know what they are. I don't necessarily know what they can do to get better right now along the offensive line. Just like many of you guys, what I can do is stand here and say, look, through 3 weeks of the season so far, this offensive line has been mega booty ass cheeks. They have been absolutely terrible. Obviously, Joe Burrow got hurt because he's running around for his life, and this is the third time now that could possibly be a season-ending injury for Joe Burrow. There's, that little small, slim chance that you might be able to get him back sometime in December if your season is still alive at that point. I do want to say, too, they did play Jalen Rivers yesterday for 23 snaps. So I got to go back and watch some of the All-22. Maybe he can help you out a little bit at that offensive guard spot. But there's a lot of season left, and we're going to see exactly how Zac Taylor and the Cincinnati Bengals navigate this offensive line. So I want you guys down at the pinned comment of today's show to grade the Bengals offensive line through 3 games, A, B, C, D, or F. Not just yesterday, games 1 and games 2 as well. Let me know what you guys think down at the pinned comment of today's show. Along with the offensive line, this run game is also just absolutely awful. It's abysmal. You can't do anything at all when it comes to the run game. You have yet to average over 3 yards per carry in the run game so far. Against the Browns, 2 yards per carry. Against the Jags, 2.8 yards per carry. And against the Vikings, 2.5 yards per carry. The only time the Bengals have been able to run the football this year is when Lucas Patrick was actually in there for the first drive of the season against the Browns. And look, I love Chase Brown, but he just hasn't been very good this year. Maybe you can blame it on Chase Brown. Maybe you can blame it on the offensive line just being really bad right now. But he hasn't been very good either. And it was a point of emphasis this week for Zac Taylor and this Bengals team that, look, they've got to get some explosive plays in the run game, and they just have not been able to do it. Against the Vikings was one of the worst performances I've seen by a running back. Chase Brown, we had the discussion a couple weeks ago. Is he a top 10 running back in the National Football League? Behind this Bengals offensive line, he's definitely not. Yesterday, he had 10 carries for only 3 yards. That's not good at all. So we'll see. Maybe Jalen Rivers is a guy that they can put in there and, help out a little bit along that offensive line, opening some holes. But if we're being honest, I know a lot of people, including myself, were not very excited about Lucas Patrick, but that first drive of the season, second drive of the season, when he was in there, was the only time the Bengals were consistently able to run the football, and he's still going to be on IR for at least another week or two, and we'll see if that injury with that ankle is going to, cause him to miss any more time after that. But right now, you cannot run the football. Overreaction number 3. The defense actually played pretty well yesterday. I don't think this is an overreaction. I want to give the defense a little bit of credit here. Look, I think the refs on the first Vikings drive, I think they kind of gifted them a touchdown. You had some just goofy penalties that I thought were kind of BS, to be honest with you, and it helped the Vikings go down there and score. Then the Vikings went punt, field goal, punt, touchdown after the offense fumbled the ball to give the Vikings the ball at midfield. Then the Bengals fumbled the ball again right before halftime, set Will Reichert up for that 62-yard field goal at halftime. Worst case scenario, that game should have been 17-3 at halftime. Instead, it was 34-3. And in the second half, the defense was just tired because they were consistently on the football field. I thought Chris Jenkins Jr. had a pretty good game yesterday. He had multiple sacks. He had a TFL. Guys that we asked to step up yesterday, Joseph Osai, Myles Murphy. I thought those guys were making some plays on the defensive side of the ball. It's not like Carson Wentz went out there and went absolutely crazy for 300 yards passing on you. He only had 173 passing yards and a couple touchdowns. And if you look at the box score, Jordan Mason did rush for, he had 16 carries, 116 yards, averaged over 7 yards per carry. But I think a lot of that really did come in the second half of that game when that game was already long gone. Who really had any confidence at halftime the Bengals were going to be able to come back in that football game? I certainly did it. I thought it was over around mid-second quarter, to be honest with you. Look, the defense was not perfect yesterday, but the one game that your defense actually goes out there and, I know it was against a backup quarterback, but they did play pretty decent, at least in that first half. And the offense ends up turning the ball over 5 times yesterday. And, the Vikings defense actually goes out there and outscores the Bengals offense. I'm not going to put that on the defense at all. I think the defense played pretty well. The offense just looked like absolute cheeks yesterday. We'll come back with some more overreactions here in just a second, but today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every single day, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. I use PrizePicks for a ton of different types of sporting events, whether it's professional football, baseball, basketball, college sports, MMA, boxing, and so much more. PrizePicks is a ton of fun, and if you guys know ball, you can win real money all season long on PrizePicks. This is what we got cooked up, the power play for tonight's slate of games. Baltimore Ravens versus the Detroit Lions, going with Derrick Henry, more than a half a touchdown. Could be rushing, could be receiving. Jahmyr Gibbs, more than 55.5 rushing yards, and also Tyler Loop, more than half a field goal on that front. So that's the power play, but the great thing about PrizePicks is they also invented the flex play, which means your lineup does not have to be perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks does not hit. PrizePicks is super simple to play. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you can cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money today. So download the PrizePicks app and use promo code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That link is down at the pinned comment of today's show. It's also down at the description of today's show as well. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Overreaction number 4. Trade for Jameis Winston. Please and thank you. That's my reaction to that. Look, he is the third-string quarterback for the Giants right now behind Russell Wilson and Jackson Dart, and there might be some competition right there. I know last night Russell Wilson was getting booed by Giants fans. I don't think if you go out there and trade for Jameis Winston, it should really cost you that much at all. And look, Jameis Winston's not perfect either, but at least he's fun. Could you imagine Jameis Winston going out there and throwing to these Bengals wide receivers? He does live and die by the sword. But, if we are going to be forced to watch quarterback play where they're going out there throwing multiple interceptions per game, wouldn't you at least want somebody who, maybe throws a couple interceptions per game, but is also throwing for 300-plus yards a game and trying to at least push the ball downfield? Every single time Jake Browning tries to push the ball downfield, it's just not a good outcome for the Bengals. Look, If you go out there and get Jameis Winston, the grass isn't necessarily going to be greener, but at least there's grass. Right now, we are just looking at dirt. Jake Browning, the first 2 games that he's played of the season, look, I know he came in that Jaguars game, so it wasn't a full game, but it just hasn't been very good so far. And I know his 65% completion percentage against the Jags and then 70% completion percentage against the Vikings. Normally, you would be like, okay, yeah, that's pretty good, but he's still not taking care of the football, and you're still not able to push the ball downfield at all. The only time you're having any kind of success with Jake Browning right now is when you're throwing the ball, less than 5 air yards, getting it out really quickly right at the line of scrimmage. That's the only time you're having any kind of success, and that really doesn't bode well after, one game. Teams are going to start preparing for that. So, look, maybe you don't want to go out there and get Jameis Winston. Maybe you think he's a, dumpster fire as well. But at this point, I just think he's better than Jake Browning. So would you trade for Jameis Winston? Let me know what you guys think. Be honest. Sound off down in the comment section. Type T if you would trade for him, or type P if you would pass. My last overreaction here is one that I've seen a lot out there on social media, in our live stream, in the comment section. Fire Zac Taylor. My take on this is I can't imagine that it actually does happen. Look, I'm not going to be a Zac Taylor apologist, so I'm not going to argue with anybody who wants him gone. I think your feelings are extremely valid on that front. But the excuses right now are already built in for Zac Taylor. Joe Burrow has been injured a lot. When Joe Burrow is healthy, they have one of the best, if not the most potent offenses in the NFL with Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase. And let's be completely honest with ourselves. The Bengals went through 16 seasons with Marvin Lewis as the head coach. They only had 7 seasons under Marvin Lewis where they went over 500. In 16 seasons, they only went to the playoffs 7 times. You're now in season 7 with Zac Taylor. So in the 6 full seasons that you've had Zac Taylor as the head coach, the Bengals have gone to the AFC Championship game twice. They went to the Super Bowl. 4 out of those 6 seasons, they've been over 500. 2019 was awful. 2020, Joe Burrow tore his knee up. So they're just going to scrap those and say they don't count. Look, the contract right now for Zac Taylor is through 2026, and I think if the Bengals end up missing the playoffs both this season and next season, maybe you have a little bit of an argument. Maybe the Bengals go out there and they just don't extend him. But, while I feel your frustration, Bengals fans, about Zac Taylor, I am not going to argue with anybody who feels this way. I just don't see it happening right now. Make sure you guys are subscribed. We're going to be here for the good, the bad, the ugly for every single game all season long for the Cincinnati Bengals. Hell, we might even do some mock drafts if the season really goes down the tank. So make sure you guys are subscribed. Hit that sub button. It is free right here at Bengals Breakdown. Trying to build a massive Bengals community here on YouTube. Hit that sub button at youtube.com/BengalsTV.